2 bilateral and 1 trilateral summit. Leaders of the United States, Japan, and the Philippines meet in Washington, D.C. The U.S., Japan, the Philippines, and Australia are conducting a joint naval patrol this week, the week of April 7, 2024, called the Australia-Japan-Philippines-United States Maritime Cooperative Activity in the Philippines Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. These joint patrols started in November 2023, but this joint patrol has more significance as the accusations between the Philippines and China over the second Thomas Shoal, also in the Philippine EEZ, have escalated. The patrol consists of 6 warships and 4 aircraft, and it's the type of cooperation that China warns the countries around the South China Sea not to participate in because it will escalate tensions. This patrol is also significant because it is ahead of the 2 summits in Washington, D.C. that will include Japan, the Philippines, and the United States that are a result of China's behavior over Taiwan and the South China Sea. The 2 summits that are to occur this week are a bilateral summit between U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, and the second will be a trilateral summit with President Biden, Prime Minister Kishida, and Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., which is a first-of-a-kind summit for these 3 countries. The joint patrols and the 2 summits have the attention of China, who calls the meeting a provocation and a destabilizing move in the region. The bilateral summit between Japan and the U.S. will take place on Wednesday, focusing on defense-related issues mainly around China and North Korea. The main part of the meeting will be to finalize changes to the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty to streamline the coordination between the 2 nations. This is primarily due to changes in the defense strategies of Japan. These changes include strategies to address a more aggressive China and North Korea, and adjust the treaty to adapt to changes in warfare not only due to changes in military technologies, but the changes in contested domains beyond traditional air, sea, and land. The final factor driving the update is due to Japan changing its military strategy to improve capabilities and readiness, which will push Japan further away from its post-World War II government-enshrined pacifist orientation. The other goal of the bilateral summit is to discuss the integration of Japan into the AUKUS Security Pact between the U.S., United States, and Australia. Between the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia. The initial discussions for Japan to participate in the, quote, advanced capabilities, end quote, projects of AUKUS, but not become a full partner. Japan's full partnership is still being negotiated as the Japanese, in the evaluation of the current AUKUS members, needs to reach specific goals around intelligence security before full participation in AUKUS. Advanced capabilities are part of the AUKUS Pillar 2 goal to promote industry and innovation sectors of the member countries and to collaborate, including joint projects, in the defense sector to deliver new advanced technologies in a time period than what was currently being experienced. This will enable the AUKUS countries to provide reformative improvements of capabilities to each of their defense sectors as well as share the results. This level of cooperation has the unstated goal of countering an aggressive China and aligns well with Japanese updates to its changing military posture. This level of cooperation by the Asia-Pacific rivals of China to field new advanced capabilities has the leadership in Beijing concerned, as can be seen in the Banal State response through the Foreign Ministry about the initiative. Biden and Marcos will meet in a bilateral format this week and then shift into the trilateral format to discuss ongoing issues in the South China Sea on Thursday. The Filipino Foreign Ministry stated that the talks were not directed at any one country, and Marcos stated that the goal was to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific, which also aligns with the U.S. naval strategy of free navigation in international waters. Despite these statements of it not being directed toward China, the focus on the summit is over China's aggressive stance in the South China Sea and Taiwan, and its denial of free access in the South China Sea or the Taiwan Straits. China claims nearly the entire South China Sea, which is about 60% of all maritime trade flowing through it, and states that Taiwan is part of China and will be reunited by force if necessary. The U.S. and partners seek a rules-based order, and the U.S. is taking the position of a traditional naval power and pushing to keep the sea lanes open for commerce. This approach has been rejected by China, and its arbitrary claims directly impacts multiple countries that transit the region, and that includes Western Pacific countries of Japan and the Philippines. The U.S. has bilateral defense alliance with both the Philippines and Japan. Japan and Philippines have a strategic partnership of its own. The partnership between the Philippines and Japan was originally around economic development, but has over the last 15 years has added common security interests in the region, with the threat from China being the cornerstone concern for both the Philippines and Japan. The Trilateral meeting will be an opportunity for the three to cooperate on the common goals of countering China, and is also part of the Philippine strategy to frustrate China in an ongoing dispute in the Second Thomas Shoal. The goal of the meeting is for the three countries to continue to grow their ties together in the area of security in the region. It is expected the result will be more joint patrols between the three countries in the disputed waters, and most likely in the Philippine Economic Exclusion Zone, but it is undecided if it will include patrols into the Second Thomas Shoal, which has been the scene of regular clashes between the Philippines and China. The Japanese and the Philippines have also entered into an agreement to allow the two countries to station troops in each other's territory as a form of deterrence. Joint naval patrols with the U.S., Philippines, and Japan in Philippine waters will make it more difficult for the Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia to use their gray zone tactics or intimidation, considering that the Japanese and U.S. navies will bring larger and more capable ships that will be beyond the capability of the Chinese adversaries, meaning the maritime militia and Coast Guard, unless China gives up the gray zone tactics and deploys the People's Liberation Army Navy and risk a naval clash. The fact is that these two summits and the results that set forth from them is a reaction to an aggressive Chinese posture in the region and its attempts to deter any form of alliances against its aggressive actions and policies. This week, despite the persistent calls of China for the region not to form alliances, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met in Beijing and reaffirmed their mutual support for each other and their common opposition to Western democracies. So, despite the rhetoric of the Chinese not to form alliances, China continues to develop its relationships and conduct military cooperation with Russia, outside of direct military support for Russia's war in Ukraine. The Russians have been in support of dividing the world into two blocks, and China, despite its statements, goes along with the Russian lead. China's position on blocks is self-serving to keep their opponents divided, but will use blocks to serve its own interest. The two summits in Washington to firm up the defensive cooperation in the Western Pacific is a direct result of the aggressive Chinese actions and its decision to ignore international law for its own self-serving interests and forcibly expand its influence in the region. The expansion of AUKUS and closer cooperation between the U.S., Philippines, and Japan will most likely not change China's claims, but will force it to reevaluate their position and tactics in making those claims. The one factor that seems clear is that both sides are building their forces and improving their capabilities in the Western Pacific, and the U.S. and its allies are taking the measures to improve interoperability for a future conflict.